Comic book women are famous for having all the right attributes to stimulate the audience imagination. And every now and then, a woman comes along, whether an actress, a model, or both, who checks all the boxes needed to be a real-life comic book character. Each decade has given us at least one beauty that lingers throughout history. And back in the 90s, there was no bigger symbol of sensuality than the larger-than-life Pamela Anderson, the blonde bombshell whose star power was so massive that her influence reached the world of comics in ways that most people don't even know about. I'm sure at this point everyone knows about Pam Anderson's involvement with Barb Wire and Stripperella, but there is one comic book character that has seemingly gone unnoticed, for the most part, which at one point was allegedly developed as a major motion picture. You see, in 2001, the popular Star Wars artist Matt Bush wrote and illustrated an independent comic which starred a character based almost entirely on Pam's likeness and personality. Daria Jontak, a spicy space blonde adventurer with a knack for showing skin. This comic, which by the way is still unknown to most people, has been making the rounds lately thanks to the swiping community. Initially due to the heavy Pam Anderson photo referencing and the lack of credit given to her. Yet it seems like the production behind the Daria Jontak comic isn't quite what it seems, as some sources claim that the comic was at one point on early stages of development to become a blockbuster film, while others claim that the comic was done without her consent, which is why her name was never mentioned. One thing is for sure though, Pam's influence and inspiration on the comic are simply undeniable. So whether Pam knew about the comic and was okay with it or not is simply unknown. Another curious thing about Daria is its tone, as it goes from campy and sensual to action and silly, as it would seem like the comic has a hard time knowing what it wants to be. The Daria Jontak comic also makes several references and nods to Pam's other roles. For example, at one point she actually wears an accurate Barb Wire suit. The comic also references Baywatch and other things Pam has done. Speaking of Baywatch, Pam's iconic role in Baywatch has been featured numerous times in all types of comics, such as Mad Magazine, The Simpsons, Archie, Animaniacs, and even the Flintstones. And that's not all. Pam's influence can be traced rather easily on the work of multiple talented creators, all the way from Jim Balent, Armando Huerta, Matt Bush, and others, though the most famous case will most likely be Greg Land, who went one step above them and actually used her as his muse. In fact, whenever you see any of his pages or cover work, you will most likely find traces of Pam somewhere. It doesn't really matter if it's X-Men, Fantastic Four, or something else entirely. Pam is ever present within his illustrations. Though Pam's touch isn't limited to comics, as Pam's influence has reached other mediums as well, such as animation and even live action. For example, in 2008, Pam Anderson would return to the superhero genre once again, playing Susan Richards, the Invisible Woman of the Fantastic Four, on the comedy film Superhero Movie. Though this version of Susan is a lot spicier than the comic book counterpart, except maybe when it comes to Greg Land, who seems to have been inspired by the Pam Anderson version. Pam was also the voice as well as the alleged inspiration behind Stan Lee's animated character, Stripperella, the secret agent slash superhero slash erotic dancer who gets in all kinds of wacky adventures where she must always show skin. Sadly, the show lasted only one season, though it is fondly remembered by those few who did watch it, myself included. However, the biggest comic book project Pam Anderson has ever been involved with is by far the 1996 film Barb Wire, where she played Barbara Kopetsky, the sensual but tough bounty hunter from Seal Harbor. The film was somewhat based on the popular Dark Horse comic of the same name. However, in the film, the character was completely modified to fit Pam, turning her into something far from what the comic was actually about. treating the project as a vehicle for Pam's career rather than a respectful adaptation of the comic. Needless to say, the Barb Wire film was a critical and box office flop. However, outside of these high-profile projects, Pam Anderson was also featured in numerous erotic comics that I simply cannot show here. I'm sorry. Though with a physique so extraordinary and exaggerated, it's no surprise that Pamela Anderson has inspired the creative minds of so many artists and their creations. Pamela Anderson's fame came with a dark side, as her career was plagued with controversies, multiple failed marriages, dangerous men, leaked intimate tapes, fighting with paparazzis, and much more. So we can safely say that Pam has had quite a life, even rivaling the characters she herself has inspired. On the bright side, Pam has been able to switch things around, having a finer, more solid acting career in her late 50s than she ever did when she was younger. She also became a bit of a pioneer as far as natural beauty goes, choosing to go makeup free whenever she does interviews, showing us that she is aging gracefully and proving that age is nothing but a number. So there you go. Having good looks can really take you places, right? By the way, hi, I'm a silicone implant. Sorry. As always, thank you very much for watching. Hope to see you in the next one. Be safe and well. And remember that age is anything you think it is. And you are either as young or as old as you want to be. Silicone implant.